Welcome back to Conversations with Boston School Psychologists, building safe and supportive schools one conversation at a time, where we spotlight the people, practices, and partnerships behind behavioral health in Boston Public Schools. I'm here with our Senior Director of Behavioral Health Services, Dr. Andria Amador, and today we're thrilled to welcome Kathy Cowan. Katherine Cowan served as the Director of Communications for NASP from January 2000 to September 2023. In her role, she oversaw general communications, crisis communications, strategic communications, and media relations for NASP, as well as supporting the communications needs of NASP programs, governance, advocacy, and marketing. She was integrally involved in the development of seminal initiatives such as the NASP Prepare program, the NASP Practice Model, Excellence in School Psychological Services program, and the National School Psychology Week, as well as co-authoring core policy documents such as Ready to Learn, Empowered to Teach, a framework for safe and supportive schools, and comprehensive school mental health services and school psychologists. Through this work, Kathy discovered and nurtured Gumby as the NASP unofficial mascot for the unwavering goodness, flexibility, and focus on the potential of every child that shapes the purpose of school psychologists everywhere. Kathy retired in 2023 to spend more time with family, but stays connected to NASP and school psychology. The upcoming convention in Chicago this February will be her 27th NASP convention. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here and see you all.
Absolutely. And I just want to say before we start that somebody has called me Gumby in the past, as I'm very tall and a little lanky and flexible. So I figured I would throw that.
So there
you go. So it's very fitting, a very appropriate profession for me. But why don't we get a question just to get to know you a little bit better? So to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your journey in this field? And can you tell us about your experience as Director of Communications for NASP? Go ahead.
Well, it is, I think journey is the right word because I am not a school psychologist, but I had the privilege of working with NASP leaders and staff and others in the field long enough that I got to the point where I felt like I could play one on TV. And it was an amazing experience. When I started at NASP in 2000, maybe before some of the people listening to this were born, I'm not sure. We only had one school psychologist on staff, and that was that we then had a position of deputy executive director. And now I think there are 8 school psychologists on staff, and the professionalization of the staff has been was a huge transformation for the organization over time, and also helped support and add to the robust NASP volunteer leadership of school psychologists. And for me personally, it was just this wealth of knowledge and experience and people who really were making a significant difference in kids' lives at the system and individual levels. And I loved almost every minute of it, and became to really believe in the unique and special role that school psychologists play because of your training and approach towards problem solving and collaboration and all of those things that kids need to, and teachers and families need to succeed in school. So I miss it, I'll be honest. But I don't miss the work. I'm really glad that there's someone else doing it at this point. But I think it says a lot about the quality of the organization, the profession, that I did something for almost this quarter of a century, and I was sad to let it go. So
that's amazing. Quarter of a century.
Yeah.
So congratulations on an amazing career, of course. And looking back, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned throughout your career that maybe you could help give as advice or recommendations to early career school psychologists? And Andria, I'm going to have you answer that after Kathy. What recommendations you'd give to early career school psychologists? Kathy, go ahead.
Well, I think lesson and rule number one is collaboration is everything. I think that's critical in schools. It's critical in problem solving. It's critical in advocacy. It's critical in teamwork. And collaboration has so many layers to it. But if you can't collaborate and you're not collaborating, something isn't happening that should be happening probably. That's number one. And that is one of the reasons why communications, which of course is my area of expertise, is an integral part of effective collaboration and how you build those relationships and those connections with people and systems in a way that whatever the important end goals are can be achieved with that collective effort. And that's true whether you're on a team, a grade level team, or a mental health and behavioral health team, whether or not you are working within your state association, your state to get something done, or at the national level. So that's one piece that I think is true. I don't care if you're director of communications or if you're director of mental and behavioral health services for Boston Public Schools. Being able to collaborate is an essential skill. And I do believe that school psychologists come by that skill rather naturally when they're talking about a child or a group of students. And it's how you, as a school psychologist, amplify that skill set for systems change as well. And we can talk more about that a little bit later.
Absolutely.
Two other little things I would say that I think are really important lessons. And one is, and we'll talk about this a little bit more too, is have your data back and your evidence and your knowledge base at your fingertips for when you're trying to work with people and collaborate with people and advocate for things, for change, because that will be a major tool, a successful tool. And then the third thing is, if you're not already, get involved. Join your state association, join your local school psych association, join NASP. There are so many rich resources and opportunities to learn and connect and collaborate with people and tools that can help you in your day-to-day life, in your day as a school psychologist. And then if you choose to take it to the next level as a volunteer, those are amazing opportunities. So.
Absolutely great answers. And I will comment on that last one, that being around a whole bunch of passionate school psychologists really lights the fire for your career. And so getting involved is absolutely an important step, especially for those who are maybe feeling like they're losing that enthusiasm. To be surrounding yourself with really passionate school psychologists will do the trick. So great answers. Andria, what recommendations do you have for early career school psychologists?
Before I start, Tim, I want to take a moment to just honor Kathy. There's not a school psychologist practicing today that has not benefited from her work. As you said in the intro, Kathy has touched some of the most important changes in our field in the last 25 years. She's been part of the practice model, part of communicating our value, School Psych Week. And so I am very honored that she's joining our little podcast today, because if there's someone who's helped change the course of my career, my professionalism, and the work in my department, it's Stacy, who we talked to, or will be coming out soon, and Kathy. The amount that I've learned from Kathy can't be measured. The impact can't be measured because not only has she done these important things, she's a very generous person in sharing her knowledge, her wisdom, and her mentoring. And I was very fortunate to get to work with Kathy on the practice model committee. And through that, every time Kathy would speak, a school psychologist listens. She's the best school psych who's not a school psych. But people listen, and smart people listen, and then they do what would Kathy do, and they do it. And so I guess my first advice for someone would be to find smart people like Kathy Cowan, like Stacy Skalski, and mentors in your own space. Ask them for help and then listen to what they say and do it. Often we seek things, but we don't take action, right? And so finding good mentors, using the resources they give and following their advice. And both of you said it, but I'll triple down on it. Become a part of your state association and NASP. When I was in grad school, I was a mom and I was married and I had to pay bills, and I did not get involved as a graduate student or an early career in either association. And it was to my deficit. And when I found the value of them later as I became an administrator and realized I needed more, I needed help, I needed information, I needed resources. And then it wasn't until I become involved that I realized how much I missed the years that I wasn't part of it. So really getting involved, a lot of graduate students will do it and then they'll stop participating. And really you need it the most in early career. We know that most school psychologists are the only school psychs in their building often, some the only school psychs in their district. Many school psychologists around the country are supervised by non-school psychologists. So you really need to be very intentional about your own mentoring and professional growth. And so those would be my tips.
Great answer, Andria. Thank you so much. And we're going to shift gears now. Kathy, as the Director of Communications, can you talk a little bit about how communication impacted advocacy at NASP and discussing that role that you had of addressing things like shortages, addressing things, spreading awareness about a lot of common issues that school psychologists face?
Wow, that could take like a couple of hours, but I know we don't have that. One, I would say that anything that I did, I was doing in concert with my colleagues, Dr. Kelly Valancourt-Strobach, Dr. Eric Roslin, who's now executive director, Stacy Skalski, Shayla Desai, all of the NASP directors that are there, and some of them who are there that I haven't worked with. We worked closely as a team on these issues. It was the collective effort to identify the problem. And early on, very early on, it was getting stakeholders, policy makers, education leaders to see school psychologists as mental health professionals, not just test givers. And while assessment is a critical and core part of what a school psychologist brings to the school system and to kids and families, providing mental and behavioral health services and expanding understanding what that is, and particularly in a school setting, was our first and biggest challenge when I first got there. It's no secret that everybody, particularly then, there were no school psychologists in people's minds. There were only school counselors, and it didn't matter. You know, if you were a school psychologist and you had a doctor in front of your name, you were still going to be considered the school counselor by most policy and parents and family. So breaking out of that cloud a little bit and having school psychologists stand as a profession, be known as a profession and recognized as a profession, and as mental health providers was our first foray. And we did it the way we have done everything, which is to start to identify what are the big issues that people don't understand and how do we talk about them so that people can understand them. Anybody who works in a school, but then if you're also in a mental health field, you tend to talk in your own language, which doesn't necessarily resonate with people. And so figuring that out and identifying ways that we could get people to connect with the issues and understand that school psychologists were a part of that solution, takes listening, and then identifying partners who care about these same issues and getting them to understand why it's important that we work together and they talk about the importance of school psychologists. Within this process, we recognized through a whole series of steps that we had taken that our biggest problem was administrators. They didn't know who we were or what we could talk about, what we could do and what we could bring to the building. So we shifted to a very specific effort to build relationships with administrator groups. And that was hugely successful over time. None of this happened overnight. None of this work is short or easy. But that has become a staple, those relationships of NASP's effectiveness across lots and lots of issues. We consistently look for opportunities to highlight the role of school psychologists and then build on those opportunities to expand the understanding of the different ways that school psychologists can be helpful. And the key one in there, I think, certainly in the mid-2000s, was school safety and crisis. And the horrible tragedy school shootings always brought mental health and safety to the forefront of people's minds, and being able to step in with helpful information at a time when people were paying attention, began to help build a platform, if you will, on which school psychologists could stand to talk about the other important issues and things that school psychologists do. So that's another way that we did that over time, finding those partners that might be less logical. We built a partnership, which was very, very important and helpful, with the National Association of School Resource Officers around what rational school safety looks like. And so there's lots and lots of examples. And then we finally realized, or it became even more evident, that the shortages was the issue for school psychology.
Yeah.
And that was a decade ago. That became really clear. And that is the hardest one of all of these issues to address, but one that can be addressed, making sure that all of these other issues are important in policymakers, stakeholders, university leaders' minds, to help build those pipelines to increase the number of school psychologists that are coming out of graduate programs, increase the number of graduate programs and slots. And communications, being able to explain and pull the issues, the needs, and the outcomes, and the strategies together in a way that stakeholders can understand. I know we're not really supposed to be using that word anymore. I apologize. It's an old word for me. That other allies and people who care about these same issues can understand what needs to happen, how it needs to happen, who needs to be involved. That requires one, having a good, thoughtful plan, but then also being able to communicate it. So there are many examples of that, but importantly, we did it as a team, and with our NASP leadership as well. The volunteer leaders are a critical component to that.
Absolutely. Kudos to all the NASP leaders and volunteers all collaborating together. It's such an important component to be able to effectively advocate, not just to people who know about school psychology, but to the many people who don't know about school psychology, and to spread awareness to them is so important. So kudos to all the good work over the years. And Andria, do you want to expand on how this ties in specifically to the Boston Public Schools, such as advocacy around school psychology shortages and ratios, and how you were able to advocate to people who might not know what a school psychologist is in the Boston Public Schools? Go ahead.
Yeah. So as a NASP volunteer leader, I've given years of service to NASP and MISPA, but I've gotten as much back as I've given. And I say that with all sincerity. And so I encourage everyone to become involved. Through my volunteer work, I had the opportunity to work very closely with Kathy and Stacy on the practice model committee, as one example. And through there, I learned several of the components that Kathy's talking about. We talked about on our committee. How do we talk about the practice model committee to people that don't understand school psychologists? How do we talk about the practice model and its value? How do we introduce the Excellence in School Psychological Services Award and why its value? And what we were able to do was, I was able to do from my own department, is take that information and knowledge and not only use the resources that NASP has. NASP has so many resources for members that you can just take back and use in your district. And Kathy was pivotal in creating those and getting those disseminated. So one thing that comes to mind, I remember when Kathy was working on infographics and talking about how do we take data and make it consumable by people who aren't school psychologists. And that really stuck with me. So not only do we use, if I turn my computer, you could see some of Kathy's infographics on my wall. Not only did we use the things that NASP produced, like the School Psych Week posters, the crisis response materials. We use what NASP creates. I use that concept of fact sheets and brought it back to my department. And for more than 15 years, we've been creating we call them fact sheets, but they're the idea that Kathy taught us about, infographics, taking data and making it simple for people. And the beautiful thing about it is, if you create a communication tool, and Tim, in your role, you've helped us with those, you can just edit it every year. So if you just do one communication activity, one new one each year, in 15 years, you then have a communication portfolio that you can talk to people about your work by just creating something new and using a template that already exists. So one of the ways we've taken Kathy's expertise and work is using NASP producer materials and then recreating a similar type of material for ourselves so we can talk about our department, what our school psychs do. Another thing that Kathy mentioned that we have really taken to heart is how can we talk about our work with people who aren't school psychologists? So both Kathy and Maurice Elias taught me the same idea. It's school psychs are good at talking to other school psychs. We have to be better at talking to people who are not school psychs. Right? So in the early days, all of our communication material was this lengthy, written, cited stuff, and nobody's going to read it, right? It's like a psych report. If everybody just reads the last page, you've lost them. So using that wisdom from Kathy, we came back and we started doing elevated pitches because we want every school psych to be able to advocate for their role, not just me. And so every few years, we do a very intentional activity where we train school psychologists and our students on elevator pitches. If you're in the elevator with the superintendent and you've got a 1 minute or 90-second ride, what is the most important thing you want to share? And that's something Kathy taught us about when we kept talking about different issues at NASP. You have 90 seconds. What are you going to be able to tell someone? That's very hard for school psychs.
It's hard for anybody, Andria. It's not just hard for a school psych. It's hard for anybody.
So hard. So
Yeah.
so we do it, and it's worked. Let me tell you that we now have this thing whenever someone's successfully able to advocate, they send it to the listserv and they say, look what I did. And they, a picture of them with the mayor stops by the school. They say, hey, guess what? This is what we need. Or they run into superintendent or lawmaker. And now people that just practicing the elevator pitch, it doesn't take money. It doesn't, take a lot of resources. It just takes intentionality and practice. But then when someone has the opportunity, they feel like they have the skills to go. So it's another communication strategy that we've taken back and used from Kathy. And now each year we produce an annual report for our department. We don't have to do that. Nobody says you have to do that, but we want to communicate our outcomes to others. And that's another communication tool that we can then use to advocate. So there's a whole bucket of communication tools that we have developed within our district over the last 20 years. And many of the ideas we stole, borrowed, and modeled from Kathy Cowan.
So can I just add one thing in there to go? So getting to the ability to argue for the ratio, which is critical to the shortages discussion, whether you're talking about the number of school psychologists in your school district, in the state, or in the country, right? We needed to help as an association quantify or clarify enough the importance of being able to provide mental health services, not just within special education, but also to the general education population, and begin to quantify what the needs are, right? How many kids on average are going to need help? What are the suicide rates we're seeing? What are the referral rates we're seeing for and correctly describing mental and behavioral health as being a part of a mental health services program? All of that work that we did in the early 2000s, mid 2000s to begin to build those messages, begin to build that data, begin to build those points and facts, became the context within which we could say, if this many kids need help, and this is the impact on their learning, this is the impact on the school environment, this is the impact on teachers' ability to teach, then we need more school psychologists to be able to help meet their needs. And yes, they're working in partnership with social workers and school counselors, but we had to build up that context, if you will, in which the shortages and the ratio conversation made sense. And that same thinking is what school psychologists are and can be doing at the local level in terms of beginning to build the need, what can be done about the need, and then how school psychologists play a role in that need, and how the ratio is either facilitating or preventing the ability to meet those kids' needs. And it's not rocket science. It is literally just knowing what you're doing, quantifying what you're doing in your district, being able to describe it. And the other thing that we learned in over time in doing this is that a lot of those same points can be used on a different issue specific advocacy moment, right? So the fact that there are this many kids who need mental health services may not necessarily be linked to the ratio in a particular conversation. It may be linked to the mental health grants that we had, then we don't, then, like fighting for those and getting those back does include a ratio conversation. But what it really matters is that those grants are important and they should be restored, right? So a lot of the work done in this it's not plug and play because it's not that simple, but you build up a catalog of information and talking points and things like that you can use to advocate in different contexts on different issues still related to the important role of a school psychologist.
Absolutely. You both gave such thorough answers. Thank you so much. And I noticed at one point during Andria's answer, you both agreed that advocacy can be hard. It's not easy. And I know there's a lot of school psychologists out there who want to advocate, who see some of the challenges, but they might be intimidated by it. They've never done it before. And so for both you and Andria, who have had a ton of experience advocating, why don't you give some suggestions or recommendations to school psychologists who have never advocated before and who are maybe finding it intimidating?
Well, I'm going to say I've never met a school psychologist who hasn't advocated because
That's
it's
true.
a critical part of the school psychologist's role to advocate on behalf of students.
You're right.
And you know that when you do that, you are communicating with the different adults in that student's life about what the student needs and how the school and the family can help meet those needs. And sometimes you're talking to their parents or caregivers or guardians. Sometimes you're talking to their teachers. Sometimes you're talking to an administrator. And each of those people, those allies in that child's life, have slightly different concerns, slightly different perspectives and experiences. And as a school psychologist, you understand that the parent has to take these strategies home, and that's a different context than what's happening in the classroom. If you're talking to the school administrator, the school administrator has not just that child to worry about, but also whatever else is going on in the school system, and also are the teachers struggling and things like that. You know how to talk to, or if you don't, you're learning how to talk to each of those individual people who are important in this kid's life, right? In order to get the right interventions in place, the right people at the table. So if you just take that knowledge and that experience and shift it over to, we actually want to apply for mental health grants because we might be able to get extra support here in our school district so that, or we want to do a partnership with a local university so that we can get some more interns in here to help provide some additional support so that as the lead school psychologist, I have more time to X, Y, or Z. Who needs to be a part of that conversation? It's the administrator. You may want to, not may, but you should also identify who else in the building will benefit by this additional work. Teachers are a big one, right? Because the more their students are getting the extra supports that they need, the better they are able to actually teach the curriculum that they need to teach. And families, who are the other stakeholders that care about this, and get them involved in the conversation. That I think you're communicating, you're advocating in the same way that you would on behalf of an individual child. And the other thing I will say about that I said in many, 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 many a workshop and presentation is that advocating on behalf of school psych services is not self-interest. What school psychologists do is very important for outcomes for children. And so if you're advocating for your ability to do something for children, you're advocating for the children. And if you keep that at center focus, it makes it a lot less scary. Another thing to think about doing is it's easier to talk to or advocate with people with whom you have a relationship. So I always described there are 3 tiers of communications in general. One is that universal level where you are just going out and connecting with your community at school or other groups in the community. You are getting to know them. You are offering to be of help if you can. You are going to the PTA meeting. You are having coffee with the principal. You are writing a little newsletter in this little article in the school newsletter about, little short tips for parents and teachers on bullying or recognizing anxiety versus bad behavior, all those kinds of things that are you're just being present and making sure people know who you are and that you can be of help. And then when you get to the point of needing something, which is tier 2, you actually have a relationship on which to start those conversations. And it makes it a lot less intimidating and much, much more effective. And then if you really get into a tier 3 is, oh my gosh, the school board is going to cut 40% of our positions and we need to prevent that from happening. And so we need all hands on deck to do that. Well, then again, you have this relationship, this habit of communications and advocacy with others who are not just school psychologists. Mm-hmm. And it takes time, it takes intentionality, but as I say many, many times, and I said before, it isn't rocket science. There is science in it though, and that is the data that you use, to back it up, to be clear and concise and succinct about what the scope of the needs, how those needs may or may not compare to other districts in the state. How the state may or may not compare to the country. And there are many, many data resources that people can find on the NASP website, publicly available, in addition to collecting the data on what you do in a way that is usable, which I don't think. Collect the data on what you're doing as a team or what you're doing as an individual and be able to present it in a usable fashion.
Absolutely. Great advice. And I really loved your point about how school psychologists all have experience with advocating for students. So applying that to public policy and school boards, things like that, can be very effective and a great recommendation. Andria, do you want to give specific tips elaborating on that same concept, but in the Boston Public Schools?
Yeah, I think you're both right. Like, people are comfortable advocating for kids, less so for systems. Sometimes people think they need permission, they need to wait until they're asked. And we disagree. We believe school psychologists are change agents. But we found through years of doing this that effective advocacy takes preparation. So we are collecting data, as Kathy mentioned, on the work school psychs do every single day. We have that data. We have turned that data into a monthly report that highlights the expanded role that school psychologists do. So when someone asks for data, I never give them the data they want. I give them the data I want them to have, which is much more comprehensive than just, for example, if you have an administrator who only wants to know how many evals you did, your response is going to be, and here's everything I did. And that's your opportunity to communicate that expanded role. So in order to advocate, we have to have that data, as Kathy mentioned, and these communication tools that I mentioned. But then we also have to have practice and preparation so we could talk about how to communicate that and how to consistently communicate it against staff members. As we have gotten bigger, we've noticed 2 things: that people have joined our organization at different time points, so they don't have the full history of our evolution. And that was causing some confusion about why or how things happen. So we needed to clarify that. And also because, when you have a large department, you do trainings, then you don't repeat them every year. We realized, we've got a whole group of people who haven't done X, Y, or Z. We need to get them into that. So I think you have to be very intentional if you really perceive yourself to be a change agent about how am I going to set myself up for success. So as Kathy says, when a threat or an opportunity arises, you are ready. You have the communication, you have the skills and the practice in using them, you have the data behind it. we now have a communication subcommittee in our department because that's how important it is. One of the other things I'll add to the conversation is branding. We learned again through Kathy and understanding the importance of creating a professional identity and sticking to that. What we've done from the beginning are create these communication materials with similar colors and logos and designs so that there's this sense of this is part of a package, which gives it more credibility. But we also brand everything. Pencils. And Kathy will smile because every time I had a new material, I would bring it to her as a small token of thanks for everything she's given to me. We have it on sweatshirts and pens and bags. And that matters because as school psychologists, we have to keep kind of getting it out there. This is what we do. This is why it matters. Here are our outcomes. So even if someone doesn't ask, here's our annual report. We started our own website. No one required that, but that's something every school psych could do is, make a department website, make a monthly or an annual report and just talk about the work. So it does take a lot of effort. It absolutely does, and it takes a lot of intentionality, but the impact has been really phenomenal. And so it's really why we wanted Kathy to come and talk about this because school psychs can be doing great work, but if no one knows it, it's helping the child, and we're thankful for that, but it's not helping the department or the system. And so I think the strategies Kathy are teaching everyone today could help every school psych listening to this podcast expand their impact and their reach by adopting any one of these activities, she said. And we're just so fortunate that we've adopted them and then built this communication package based on a lot of the learning and advice Kathy's giving today.
So, just one point to add here. People work in different contexts, right? So Boston Public Schools has a rich resource of leadership and enough school psychologists that you can have a communications committee and things like that. That's awesome. It is possible also for people who are the lone school psychologists, working in one of the big states that you spend a lot of time in your car, or where you don't have huge teams of school psychologists to do this work as well. And it will look different, though, initially to start out. And I have talked with school psychologists and learned from them over the years who, one woman was the only school psychologist in her district. And initially, and some years later, there were 16. And it was really starting small. Do School Psychology Awareness Week, or it's National School Psychology Week. It's not School Psychology Awareness Week anymore. All that stuff NASP just gives to you, right? If you're a NASP member in particular, begin to identify maybe colleagues in other districts in your state, in your area. Brainstorm with them about what's going on. Talk with if your university, your closest university, or the one that provides the most school psychologists in the state, and see if there are opportunities there to begin to build data or possibilities and ideas about how to add to the number of school psychs in your district. It's not going to look the same in a very small school district or a very rural school district or an urban district. There are going to be differences, but you can do this. And it's okay and probably wise to try and start small and take your successes in that, and then look for opportunities to go to the next step. I just wanted to point that out because I know it's awesome you have a communications committee. I love that so much, but not everybody's going to be able to do that.
So start where you can and build up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to look different for different districts. But I have seen the data that your district has been taking, your department has been taking, Andria, and I'm just so blown away by it because it doesn't just have one particular set of data, but it outlines it by tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and we're able to show administration, look at what your school psychologist is doing for your school at the tier 1 level, at the tier 2 level, at tier 3 level. We're not just evaluating students, we're doing a very comprehensive role as school psychologists in the Boston Public Schools, and it's a phenomenal advocacy tool.
And I just want to add one other little point. Sorry, but one of the things, my observation, that you and your colleagues in Boston have done really well is weather the transition of administrative superintendents and changes in leadership, which happen in school districts, right? So you can have a superintendent or a principal who is all on board with what you've worked with them to understand and is really supportive, and then they move on for whatever reason, and you're starting over again. But having those systems in place, those habits, having that data, having those tools give you a jump start to be able to work with the next set of leaders to at least stay stable, and hopefully then continue to move forward and continue to build. And my observation is that Boston has done that really well. You guys have done that really well. And big school districts are hard, man. Urban school districts, there's a lot of, and I don't mean this negatively, but just in the reality is there's a lot of politics with a small p that go into large systems. So.
Absolutely. Kudos to the success of Boston Public Schools. So we are almost out of time, but I want to wrap up with two very fun questions. Given that it's going to be your 27th time at NASP, which is amazing, I wanted to ask you, Kathy, if you had any fun memories from NASP. What was your favorite NASP memory?
At the convention?
Yeah,
At conventions? Oh gosh. So I'm going to be real quick here. I'm going to say three short things. One, this is my third convention not being in charge of communications at the convention. So it's a very different experience. But while I was director of communications, my favorite experiences were when the general session was done. Number one, because it's a huge amount of work. So that sense of relief that everything went well and that I had done the best I could for the president and all those kinds of things was hugely was a great feeling. There are so many great moments at a NASP convention. If you haven't gone to a NASP convention, go to one if you at all possibly can. I loved. The one biggest memory is probably when I discovered Gumby in 2009 at the Boston convention, and that's a whole story we don't have time for here today. But I can send that in writing to Andria and to you, Tim, and you can figure out what you want to do with it. And then the other thing that I love most about the NASP conventions, which I still get to love, is being with my colleagues and seeing people that I work with throughout the year but don't get to be with, people I haven't seen in a while. Those are my favorite things about the convention, really, are the people.
That's wonderful. I completely agree. It's so great catching up with school psychologists at the NASP convention. Andrea, do you want to add your favorite NASP memory?
Yeah, I think another reason to get involved with NASP is you get to make friends from all around the country. And someone once equated the NASP convention to summer camp for school psychologists. And I love that because
minus the bugs.
Minus the bugs, but you get to see all your friends from around the country and really connect and collaborate and do meaningful things. So there's always something at every convention that's fun, whether it's singing at a piano bar, going out to dinner. One of my most touching memories is when someone I love and respect gets an award and you get to be there and you get to celebrate that person. So the one that just came off the top of my head is when Stacy Skulski we had an event for her. Was it
Lifetime Achievement Award? Yeah.
Lifetime Achievement.
Last year.
And it was like I wasn't winning an award, but I was so filled with pride and joy that this person who had given so much of her career and her skill set to the field was being honored. I think NASP does a really nice job of that. And those are very special moments when people get the Lifetime Achievement Award and you get to celebrate.
School Psych of the Year Award is also a great one too. So they all are.
It's very special. Yeah.
I agree. I love that award ceremony. I make sure to make it every time I'm there. So good answer. Let's end with a fun fact. So Kathy, do you have a fun fact to share with the viewers?
Well, I don't know if it's fun. But I when I retired, everybody wanted to know what I was going to do with my life. And I'm like, I don't know. But I have started taking up drawing. In last July, I started taking a drawing class, and I don't hate it. I'm just going to say. So it's nice to do something that doesn't require words.
And you're going to show us, Kathy?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I did this summer. It's my banana and duct tape.
All right. Very cool.
I
have one also here that is crumpled paper. You can't get more interesting than crumpled paper.
Very cool. Andria, do you have an art-related fun fact?
Yes. My art has been in not one, but 2 art museums. In high school, my paper bag drawing, Kathy, I match our crumpled paper with a paper bag, was chosen to represent our high school. And then in college, one of my drawings was in our college art fair. I laugh about it because I did not enjoy drawing. It's because I don't like being wrong, and art, it's just a whole series of being wrong. So the whole like erasing and shading and angle, it just was so stressful that I didn't find it enjoyable at all. But that's my fun fact, that I had 2 drawings, both I think of paper, in an art show.
Paper's hard.
Very cool.
Paper's hard.
It is.
And I don't have an art-related fun fact. I've never been a good drawer, but I have been picking up some fun hobbies of learning Spanish and learning salsa dancing for my wife, who is Honduran, and so trying to get good at those 2 things. So that's been fun.
Well, at least one of those sounds fun.
Yeah. They say you'll learn Spanish if you have a reason to. You'll learn a foreign language easier if you have a reason to. And probably the same with dance, Tim. So at the convention, we expect to see you doing salsa dancing.
I don't know if they'll play salsa music, but if they do, I will definitely dance to it. Thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us. This has been so much fun. It's just been such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure for me. It feels a little like old home week.
Absolutely. And thank you to the viewer for watching Boston School Psychs Podcast. Please follow us on our socials, Boston School Psychs, and visit our website, bostonschoolpsychs.com, to learn more about our work. Join our next conversation to learn more about resources and tips for creating safe and supportive schools. Thanks again, Kathy. We really appreciate you.
Of course. I appreciate you guys, and hopefully I'll see you guys in Chicago.
Absolutely.